fuller hair. With Hair Biology thickening treatment, designed to work with your hair as you age, proudly show your age with hair.
Et donc, that's the problem. Of being full of pride and haughty. What it is? Wealth.
For additional cost information, please call toll-free 1-800-226-8903.
Most people know that Mr. Clean Magic Eraser removes crayon and scuff marks from walls, but did you know it even cleans tough kitchen and bathroom messes that are sometimes tough to tackle? Just wet, squeeze, and erase gray soap scum on your bathtub. Erase cloudy hard water spots in your shower. Erase burnt-on stovetop messes. So for all your tough kitchen and bathroom messes, try Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. Mr. Clean, Mr. Clean, Mr. Clean.
2 minutes are up. Now more Kane and Corey. Up 92.3, New York's alternative.
Coach, ladies and gentlemen, took some studies. I'm proud of it. The amount of things we know about Bushman, come on, America, come learn all of that. Jesus, a little bit my grandfather and my step-grandmother teach me, was a stepping stone. But you what, call me for the answer. I don't control it. 5 times what thing come up is free. That's what I'm going to get because you're sick in your belly and then check that someone and do something. 1-800-875-5433. That's 1-800-875-5433. This same nut that I'm talking about is used a lot in many cultures for weddings, gatherings of chiefs, and all kind of thing. And it's known as a miracle medicine in the Caribbean. When I talk about people, yeah man, I just decided to run my mouth today because I don't care where you get in your herbs or anything.
Burke discuss editing a new anthology called You Are Your Best Thing. Plus, a celebration of National Poetry Month continues with a call-in about your favorite poems. Tune in today at noon on 93.9 FM and AM 820 or ask your smart speaker to play WNYC. 65, mostly sunny, and 87 for a high.
This is James Menendez with NewsHour. It's 25 years to the day since a gunman went on the rampage in Tasmania in Australia, killing 35 people and wounding 23 others. Martin Bryant is serving a life sentence with no possibility of parole for carrying out what became known as the Port Arthur Massacre, named after the quiet tourist town where Bryant opened fire. The killing shocked the nation, of course. It remains Australia's worst mass shooting. But it also had a profound effect on the country's relationship with guns, a watershed moment in Australian life, and one led by a Conservative Prime Minister, John Howard, who'd only been elected a month before. Could it be replicated elsewhere? I've been talking to Philip Alpers, Associate Professor at the Sydney School of Public Health and an expert in gun policy around the world. Can you tell me first about the political context for the change in gun laws?
John Howard had only just been elected as Prime Minister, and he was one of the country's most conservative in decades. He knew that much of his electoral strength came from the rural rump of conservative voters, and many of those were gun owners. So Howard came back from the scene of the Port Arthur Massacre, having shed a tear, as most of us did, and his reaction was as British as it was Australian. It was really surprising. Howard's mantra then, and for decades since, has been that Australia would not go the American way on guns. And this country had already had a long string of 11 mass shootings in previous years. So Port Arthur was the last straw. And he knew he had public approval ratings for his gun control proposals up in the range of 90 to 95%.
So to that extent, it wasn't much of a political risk for him.
It certainly was at the time. Everybody thought it was going to be a tremendous risk. I mean, he was going out to farmers' meetings, and for the first time ever in Australia, a Prime Minister was photographed with a flak jacket, wearing a bulletproof vest under his jacket. That was the kind of vociferous opposition that he got. And we have a gun lobby just as there is in the United States, not as powerful, but man, they were angry. But what happened next was the National Firearms Agreement. Universal gun owner licensing. Suddenly you needed to prove a genuine reason to own a firearm. And there was nationally uniform firearm registration, which made every gun owner personally responsible for each weapon. But above all, Howard wanted a total ban on the firearm which was clearly the weapon of choice for mass killers and still is, and that's semi-automatic shotguns and rifles. So his idea was to mount a massive gun buyback program to destroy about 700,000 guns. And Howard and his many allies achieved all of those changes in just 12 days.
Thinking about those semi-automatic rifles, is there evidence to suggest that is a key way of reducing mass killings?
Because we would have had to have one state do this and the others not do it, scientifically we can't claim causality 100%. But the indicators are very, very strong, and the scientific studies that have been done since all agree that it was the right thing to do. Because over the next few years, Australians destroyed well over 1 million firearms. And that was about 30% of the privately held firearms in Australia. And the public health effect was dramatic. The country didn't see another mass shooting for the next 22 years. And the statistical risk of an Australian dying by gunshot plummeted by more than 50%. And that risk has stayed at that low level ever since. There's been no displacement to other methods of killing.
Everything you've said suggests that it can't be replicated in the US. It was something particular to Australia. But are there lessons for an administration, perhaps like the Biden administration, that is thinking of trying again to bring in tighter gun controls?
There is a long-range prediction that eventually the United States will do something similar. They've done it with the automobile road toll. They led the world, the HIV, tobacco reduction. All of these things were led by the American public health community, and eventually they will do the same with firearms. They have to get over this ideological problem that they have, which is that Americans believe themselves to be more free than the rest of the world because they own guns. In fact, Australians believe themselves to be a bit more free because they don't have to worry too much about guns. So it's going to take centuries. I think you and I will both be long gone before it happens, but I think it will happen in the United States.
Professor Philip Alpers. Let's end the programme today by talking about a story that's dominated the headlines here in the UK over the past few days, and in which there's been a significant development today. The country's Electoral Commission says it's launching a formal investigation into how the Prime Minister Boris Johnson paid for the refurbishment of his Downing Street flat. Prime Ministers are allowed just over $40,000 per year for decorating their accommodation, but Mr Johnson's refurb costs considerably more, and it's not clear how that was covered. Let's talk to our UK politics correspondent, Rob Watson, who's on the line. This sounds serious for Mr Johnson, is it?
Yes, potentially it is very serious indeed, because he is now being investigated by the Commission, by the body, which essentially makes sure that politicians and political parties stick by the rules when it comes to their funding and behaviour. And I mean, if this was to, for example, if you take this to an extreme, I mean, it is perfectly possible if the Commission was not happy with what you had done, that you could be forced to restand for election to the House of Commons.
What's Mr Johnson said? It was Prime Minister's Questions in the House of Commons, that sort of weekly shouting match. Did he talk about it?
He certainly did, and it was probably the angriest I think I've ever seen him. I was standing sitting just a few meters away from him. Look, he insisted, look, he'd done nothing wrong, in the sense that in the end he had ended up paying for all this redecoration himself, but he couldn't answer this utterly simple question, which was, when the work was first done, when the bills first came, who paid for it if it wasn't you? Was it the Conservative Party? Was it a rich business donor to the Conservative Party? And was it a loan? Why all this matters is because the rules say that politicians, yes, can take donations, can take gifts and loans, but they have to declare it, because you just want to avoid that impression that someone has given money and maybe getting some favour in return later down the line. And Mr Johnson just would not answer it.
It's been a pretty torrid week for the Prime Minister, hasn't it? And yet all the polling, at least until now, suggests that, he still has a substantial lead.
Yes, and I'm glad we had time for this question, because in normal circumstances you could also have thrown in, James, that his closest advisor last Friday night, Mr. Dominic Cummings, accused him essentially of being incompetent and corrupt. And in my long experience of covering British politics, sort of 30-odd years, that would normally have finished anybody off. Why doesn't it? I think because of Brexit, really. This is a country split now into two tribes, and those in the Brexit tribe, Mr. Johnson is their chief. They like him and they tend to stick by him through thick and thin.
Rob, we'll see how this all plays out. Our UK politics correspondent Rob Watson joining us live on the line. And that is just about it for this edition of the programme. A reminder again that there is much more on the pandemic, and particularly that terrible situation in India on our website, bbc.com/news. But for now, from me and the rest of the team here in London, thanks for listening. I'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.